Hello everyone and welcome to the After LP review slash thoughts on Thief 2, a game that you could say was pretty much Looking Glass Studios' official last release. There was one other game they started on that another development team finished, but Looking Glass Studios had long gone defunct before that game got released. They actually went bankrupt about 2 months after this game was released, which is really sad, because it's not because of this game's fault. As always, this will be pretty much a spoiler-free review of Thief 2 for the most part. However, obviously, when I'm talking about the story and the characters a little bit, there might be some minor spoilers for Thief 1. So if you want to play that game first, which you absolutely should, it's a classic PC game that if you're interested in old games, I feel like it's required playing if you're interested in the stealth genre. The story starts off pretty much where the first game left off. Garrett has been trying to go back to his normal of a life as possible, doing his day-to-day things of just stealing, looting, and trying to forget about all of the horrible things that happened to him in the first game. It isn't long before the Keepers get a hold of him and start telling him of an ancient evil and his role in all of this, and Garrett really doesn't care. And that's what I love about Garrett as a character. He is not a typical, even really a typical anti-hero. He doesn't care. He's just trying to live his day-to-day life doing his job. It's almost Pulp Fiction-esque in that regard, where, you know, he's planning like a big heist and this dangerous place to steal these treasures, but it's just like another day job to him. You know, it's just another job. He's just trying to pay the bills, and he really couldn't care less if the world was burning around him, as long as he can just, you know, he's like an everyman. So obviously when the Keepers approach Garrett and they start telling him about his role in this ancient prophecy, he wants nothing to do with it after everything he went through in the first game. Unfortunately, he gets embroiled in it anyway through happenstance. He basically has to go clean up this mess, not because he wants to save the world or anything, but because he got drawn into it and now he just is trying to survive. There is a bit of a character arc for Garrett in this game to some degree, but for the most part, he's still the same snarky protagonist we know and love from the first game, and that's what I absolutely love about him. The character arc he undergoes is, you know, kind of typical to some degree, and I hope when I inevitably play Thief 3, he isn't too changed, because I really do enjoy his personality. It's refreshing for a game like this. There is a cast of supporting characters, but for the most part, Garrett is the main star of the show, so to speak, besides the main villain. Other settings about this game is, you might remember from the first game, the Hammers, which was kind of a cult that worshipped, I don't know, blunt objects. But the Hammers have all been disbanded at this point and replaced by a new cult called the Mechanists, who believe in the power of steampunk and nothing else. Truly the world will be paved with metal and coal, is their philosophy. Turns out they're just as crazy as the Hammers, and it's up to you to uncover their evil plot, while looting as much as possible. Now, with the Hammers gone and the Mechanists taking their place, the setting takes a very decidedly different route than the first game, and it's startling at first, because the first Thief game really startled me when I thought it was going to be all steampunk, and then they started throwing all of these magical elements at me, where there's fire elemental shooting fireballs, and there's wizards and mages, and all of this, like, mystical magic stuff going on, and now it's like almost a complete 180 from that. Now, everything is incredibly steampunk. I'm expecting some magical stuff, but there's hardly any in Thief 2. It's a really stark contrast, and I'm not sure if that just goes along with the theme of the game. With this game is subtitled The Metal Age, by the way. Maybe that's what it was all about, but it's just weird after playing the first Thief game. If this is the first one you play, then, you know, it'll seem normal to you, but it's almost like it doesn't take place in the same universe to a certain extent. For the most part, though, that covers the story without really spoiling much. There's not too much to talk about because there's not a whole lot of characters that I can talk about without spoiling things besides Garrett. So let's jump into the gameplay, and for this section, I guess I'll just refer you guys back to my Thief 1 review / thoughts. There's not a lot that's changed. This game seems to be using the exact same engine, although improved a little bit, I think. And it plays basically identical. It's really strange to me that a company like Looking Glass Studios, which in my mind is the company that was the innovator. They never seemed to release a game unless they thought it was going to be new, interesting, and something that hadn't been done before. And it's so weird to play this game and have it be so status quo. If I didn't know better, I would think I'd be playing a level pack for Thief 1. Almost all of the equipment is the same. There's a handful of new ones, like an invisibility potion that lasts a little, that basically turns you invisible but doesn't mask your footsteps for a little bit. There is a slow fall potion, which basically just turns on low gravity for like 6 seconds. Which, by the way, you can still get hurt if you fall from a high enough distance. And a handful of items of useful quality at first, like the scouting orb where you can throw it and it gives you a little camera view. But then I could never get used to the way the physics handled that, as it just always slid way too far from where I wanted it to go and I couldn't see anything. Overall, it's the same: sneak around, bash their heads, and just go through the level to try and complete your objectives. Which, they kept the same objective system as before, which I love, which is GoldenEye style. And by that, the higher difficulty you play on, it doesn't just make the enemies tougher, there's more objectives to complete, or more loot that you have to grab throughout the level. The most variation in the gameplay compared to the first game has to do with this game's setting. Once again, a lot of the magic elements are gone here, so almost all of your foes are regular soldiers, whereas in the first game, you had plentiful amounts of hammer haunts, which are kind of like ghosty-like enemies. Zombies were everywhere. You had lobster men, all sorts of like magical creatures attacking you, and in this game, almost every enemy is either a regular guard, a robot guard, or a robot tank thing that shoots bombs. So gone is that weird quality of fighting the unknown to some degree, which was a little bit exciting. Now, don't get me wrong. I know some of you are saying, but Minotaur, this is exactly what you asked for in the first Thief. You didn't like all of the zombie fights. You didn't like the hammer hunts when they threw you into combat and made you fight them. And yeah, I guess I did. That's what I thought I wanted. And to be honest, it is still really great in this game. It's just strange for a Thief game in my mind at this point. To take those elements out is just so odd, and I really did not enjoy fighting the robot enemies at all, because while you could sneak past them, they were just so annoying. I wanted to take every single one out, which means you have to shoot water arrows into their backs, which is so annoying. But everything still works well. The sneaking is still the same as the last game. It's top notch. You have your light indicator at the bottom of the screen letting you know how well lit up you are, so you have an idea of if the enemies will be able to see you or not. Just like before, the enemies are kind of big dumb idiots. As long as you're hidden in complete... As long as your, visibility gem at the bottom of the screen is showing you're in complete darkness, unless they're touching you, they're not going to see you. Now, again, with the difference in setting, it changes up how the levels play out as well. I believe one of my complaints, or one of the things that off-put me a bit about the first Thief game, was how maze-like some of these levels could be. You'd often be traveling into catacombs like it's Tomb Raider, or an ancient mystical grove, or, something really out of the ordinary that was like a big maze tunnel. And all of that is gone. Everything is a very conventional setting in this game. It's all very urban. It's all very standard mansion-like. And the level design is still top-notch, but again, you're missing that magical feel a little bit. There was nothing that blew my mind as much as like the Little Big World from the first game, or the mansion that had all of the goofy illusion traps and all of that. But what's here is still really, really good. It's just very different. Now you're running along rooftops, or you're, in general, big mansions for rich people. That takes a lot of the elements like the graveyard and this feeling like you're looting an ancient tomb, like the catacomb level from the first game. Honestly, it's going to depend on your taste whether you like that or not. That's kind of what I was looking for a little bit, so I really enjoyed it. But to some degree, I did miss some of the more out-of-the-ordinary levels. And there's one in this game in particular, and it's such a breath of fresh air when you get to it. And then everything goes back to being so ordinary afterwards. It's just so strange. If what you loved about the first Thief game is this world that kept you guessing as to what's going on in it, and you loved those levels where it was catacombs and kind of raiding a tomb, then you're going to be kind of disappointed in that regard for Thief 2. And it definitely seems like a conscious decision to exclude those levels. Perhaps because, much like I said in my review of the first game, maybe people didn't like that as much at the time. Now, there definitely were some more elements that got a little bit annoying in this game. As I said, I wasn't a fan of the robot-type enemies. They're really creepy at first, but you quickly get used to them and they become more of a nuisance than anything. Also, they decided to throw a lot of auto turrets around. In general, that aspect got a little bit annoying too, because you had to constantly turn them off. And even if there's not enemies around, you just step into their line of sight and they just go bananas on firing at you. The level design is still incredibly good. And the one thing is that while those magical style levels are not here anymore, it also eliminates a lot of the maziness about them. In the first Thief game, I got a little bit annoyed because I'd constantly be trying to figure out what exactly they wanted me to do with the objective, or where I was supposed to find, like, this one lost holy grail in this entire maze of a level. And I never really had that problem in Thief 2. And it's not that the levels are more straightforward. They're still very open-ended in that, you can have 4 different access points to this house and kind of tackle it in any way you want. But everything felt really tight and intuitive, to where by the time I was done going through the entire thing, I'd often meet all the objectives I was trying to do. Unlike the first game where I would miss one little thing and I'd have to scour the entire level again for it. That aspect is awesome. I never felt like I had to backtrack too much, or that I was missing an objective, or I had to, I was on that verge of, do I have to use a walkthrough to figure out what they want me to do here? Everything just felt natural, and that's great. Overall, yeah, the game's just very similar to Thief 1. If you liked Thief 1, and if you really liked Thief 1, you're probably going to really like this game too. There's a few things about it, depending on what you really liked about Thief 1, that might off-put you a bit, but overall it's the same game that you probably loved before. Now, as far as the graphics go, I can tell that the character models are definitely more detailed than the first game, and that's cool. Overall, though, I think by the year 2000, this engine probably was starting to show its age a bit, in that the graphics might not have been as wholly impressive as they were before. They still don't look bad by any means today, but for the year 2000, they were probably starting to show their age a bit. Still very playable. The audio design is fantastic, just like the first Thief game. And in a game like this, that's incredibly important, because it's a first-person stealth game. You need to know exactly where sounds are coming from. The directional sounds are great. The soldiers make noises so that you're always kind of aware in general where they will be at, and you're not going to be surprised. It just works so well. And the voice acting. Oh, I gotta touch on the voice acting. Just the best voice acting I've ever heard in my life. Okay, well, maybe the voice acting isn't the best, but it's the best in a so campy and borderline bad that it is just fantastic, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Such slander will not be tolerated while we're on watch. You'd best run and rescue your helpless limp lord before he flounders in his own vomit, or wakes up naked in a hen coop. Scurry off, or you'll require some unnecessary ventilation. Is that a threat, you shriveled old maid?
Oh my God!
You gonna prick us with your sewing needles? On this side of the street, we shoot like soldiers, so don't make promises your arrows can't keep.
We need a fence between you guys.
You gone too far this time, you camel-mannered tunic-wearing mollycoddle!
Ooh.
Arrow in the throat and I'll shut you up!
Are they gonna kill each other?
Have at thee!
I mean, the main characters, Garrett, amazing voice actor. I could not imagine a different voice. That's legitimately very good. And another character later on. But all of the random guards, and I think the writing just really lends itself to this, but it'll just have you cracking up multiple times at what these guards say and how it's delivered. Let me just say, they really liked their medieval speak of adding S's to the end of everything and throwing in a lot of yees. It really adds to the feel of the game. Some people might disagree with me on this and just say that it's just bad. I think it's amazing for how bad it is. Props to the voice actors, who were probably a lot of members of the dev team. The game feels a bit rushed at times, and this kind of goes along with the story of the game. They were very pressed for time when this game was coming out, and as I said, Looking Glass Studios was on their last legs. the game actually got delayed enough to where Eidos the publisher had to personally fund this game, and even then Eidos gave them a very hard deadline after a while, basically saying if it's not done by this date, the game's just over. It's not going to happen. And so the ultimate crunch time of crunch timiness for these devs was on. And to be honest, once you know that story and how pressed for time the developers were, it's actually impressive how little of a rushed feel this game has. There are definitely certain aspects. I would say there is almost at the very end of the game, there's 2 missions that use the exact same map. A little bit patty there. And towards the end of the game, I started noticing some really weird stuff, like objects just floating in midair, or like the scenery, like parts of the level were just kind of not attached to the ground. And I can't tell if that's playing on a new PC or not. It could be, but overall, you can see it a little bit. But I tell you what, as far as game dev rushes have to go, it's dang impressive that this game turned out as fantastic as it is. Guys, if you are interested in retro games at all, in general, and you really like you like the stealth genre, this is like the Thief games, at least the first 2 so far, are like required playing. These games set the standard for what this genre is about and how to do it right. I would say start with Thief 1, because honestly the 2 games are very similar to each other. And then, depending on if you really liked Thief 1, then obviously go play Thief 2. It's just more of what you love. If you didn't like Thief 1, you might still want to give Thief 2 a try, depending on what it is you didn't like about it. If you didn't like the fact that it had maze-like levels and you were getting confused, then give Thief 2 a shot. The in-game map does work really, really well, and a lot of the maziness is gone. What a legendary game, and what a legendary end to a legendary studio. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you guys thought of Thief 2 in the comments. If you watched the Let's Play, or if you've just played the game in general. I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about it, because I'm not sure the kind of reception this game gets nowadays, because I know Thief 1 is still considered a pure all-time classic, and I think Thief 2 is as well, but I'm just curious to get other thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. Till next time, later everyone.